I was 12 years old when I first saw her. It was the rainy season in our village, a time when the earth smelled rich and fresh, and the river swelled with rushing water. My mother always said that the rains brought both life and mystery, but I never understood what she meant until that year. Our village, Ndimu, sat at the edge of the great forest. The elders told us that the trees had spirits, that the river was alive, and that the land carried stories older than our ancestors. But as children, we paid no mind. We ran barefoot through the muddy paths, chasing each other in the rain, our laughter mixing with the sound of the falling drops. That was when I saw her for the first time. She was walking alone on the narrow path that led to the river, her white wrapper soaked and clinging to her frame. Her head was covered with a shawl, and her steps were slow, deliberate. The rain poured down, but she did not rush like the rest of us would have. Instead, she moved as if she belonged to the rain itself. I had never seen her before. In our village, everyone knew each other. If a visitor arrived, the news would spread faster than the morning sun. But this woman, she came and went without a word. I nudged my friend Jumo. "Do you see her?" Jumo frowned, following my gaze. "Who?" "The woman in the rain," I whispered. Jumo looked again, then shook his head. "You're imagining things, Otieno. Let's go before Mama calls us." I wanted to ignore it, to believe that my eyes had played tricks on me. But something about her unsettled me, and it wasn't the last time I saw her. The woman returned every time it rained. At first, I thought maybe she was one of the fisherwomen, but no one in the village knew her. When I asked my mother, she hushed me with a warning. "There are things better left alone, Otieno." But how could I leave it alone? Each time the clouds darkened, I watched the path to the river, and without fail, she would appear, always at the same pace, always at the same time. One evening, curiosity got the better of me. The rain had just begun to fall, and the sky was a deep shade of grey. I told my mother I was going to fetch water, grabbed a small gourd, and ran toward the path. She was there. This time, I followed her. The sound of my feet splashing in the puddles was drowned by the steady drum of the rain. I kept my distance, moving carefully so she wouldn't hear me. The path curved down toward the riverbank, and she stopped at the water's edge. She knelt. I watched as she dipped her fingers into the river, stirring the surface as if speaking to it. My heart pounded. I wanted to see her face, to understand who or what she was. Then she turned. Her eyes met mine. A cold shiver ran through me. She wasn't angry. She wasn't surprised. She simply stared, her gaze heavy with something I couldn't name. Then, just as slowly, she stood and walked into the river. I gasped. The water should have risen to her knees, her waist. She should have struggled against the current, but she didn't. She walked deeper and deeper, until the river swallowed her whole. She was gone. I ran home, my breath short, my clothes soaked, my heart slamming against my ribs. I told my mother everything. She listened in silence, her expression unreadable. Then she sighed and stood, walking to the corner of the hut where she kept her old calabash. She ran her fingers over its smooth surface before turning to me. "Come," she said. We walked through the village, past the elders sitting under the baobab tree, past the small huts with their smoking chimneys. We stopped in front of Nyakano's hut, the oldest woman in the village. She was waiting for us. "You have seen her," Nyakano said before I even spoke. I nodded. She sighed, stirring the fire with a long stick. "She was once one of us." I frowned. "Many seasons ago," she continued, "there was a woman named Adhiambo. She was beautiful, kind, and loved by all, but she carried sorrow in her heart." My mother shifted beside me, staring into the flames. "Her husband was a fisherman," Nyakano said, "and one stormy night, he went to the river and never returned." I swallowed hard. "She waited for him," the old woman went on. "Every day, she sat by the water's edge, hoping he would come back. The rains came and went, but he never did." My chest tightened. One evening, she walked into the river and was never seen again. The fire crackled. The wind howled outside. "She walks when it rains," Nyakano said softly. "Searching, always searching." I could barely breathe. "What does she want?" I whispered. Nyakano looked at me, her aged eyes deep with wisdom. "Sometimes, the dead do not realize they are dead." A heavy silence filled the hut. I never spoke of her again, but I never stopped seeing her. Each rainy season, when the sky darkened and the river swelled, I watched from my hut. And there she was, walking the same path, carrying the same sorrow. She never looked at me again, and I never followed. Some things, my mother once said, are better left alone. And now, I understand why.